Alrighty, in this video what I want to do is I want to talk about a really awesome feature of the build system. This is sort of one of the things that I want to bring up just because we spend a whole lot of time talking about the build system. We've seen how we can easily compile and launch our application with it. But there's another really cool feature that makes really the whole new switch to Gradle really worth it, in my opinion, other than the rest of the other sort of conveniences that we get out of that. And that is product flavors. Now, let's say you have an application and you want to release a pro version and a standard version. You want these to effectively be two separate applications entirely. Different names, different icons, different features, but use the same code base. So how would you go about doing that? Well, Gradle provides us with a feature to be able to do that very, very easily. And they're called product flavors. What a product flavor is it's basically a sort of override that you can use. What I mean is, you see how inside of our source folder we have this main? Well, think of this main folder as our base. All of our base resources and our base classes and all that stuff. Well, what if we could have a pro version that we could build that would overlay on top of that main directory when it's built, so that the code that we have wanting available for our pro version appears in our pro version, but not in our standard version. Well, you'd accomplish that with flavors. So I want to write up a really quick demonstration on how to use flavors and how to get that all to work and how to have multiple copies of the same, basically the same application, but in reality two different applications on your Android device from the same project. So, to set the stage for this, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce a string resource just for demonstration purposes. So I'm going to go into main, res, values. I'm going to plop strings over here, and I'm going to create a new string resource. I'm going to say string name equals, I don't know, main text. And then this is the main text. Alright, so where are we going to use main text? Well, I'm just going to use it in our view file. So I'm going to plop back down to res, open up layout, and then open up main.xml, and come over here. And then on the first text view, I'm going to replace it with @string/main text, which corresponds directly to the name that I specified in the resources folder. So now the string of this text view will be determined by the main text value. Alright, so far so good. Let's go ahead and come over here, and I'm going to run Gradle w install debug. Just make sure that gets all compiled and all that fun stuff. Then come over here to getting motion and launch main activity, and now you see this is the main text right here in the resource. The reason I'm doing this is to demonstrate how the XML resource merging works, which shouldn't make any sense at this point, but will very shortly. Now that we have that out of the way, let's go all the way back into the root of the project. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take build.gradle and I'm going to open it up in a text editor. I'm going to switch over my syntax over into Groovy. And I'm going to manipulate this. What I need to do is I need to tell Android that I want to have two flavors. I want to have a standard edition and a pro edition. So how are we going to use this in the app? Well, remember how I said we have an in-memory version where everything's just for testing, all the data is supplied statically and doesn't require a network connection, and we also have a live version where the data is provided by the actual service URL or the actual web service? Well, this is how we're going to implement it. We're going to implement it through flavors. So how do we introduce flavors? Well, before we do that, what I want to do is show one more time Gradle w tasks. You guys don't have to type this command out if you don't want to. But again, if you just take a look over here on what we're getting, we get a list of all the tasks that we can run. Now let's come over here, back here in my build.gradle, and underneath build types, I'm going to enter a line. So I'm still inside the Android element, but I'm underneath the build types. It's actually irrelevant where it shows up here, but just for clarity, I'm putting this at the bottommost line I can, just making sure I'm still inside this curly. And I'm going to say product flavors. and then I'm going to open up some curlies, and then I'm going to say pro, and then I'm going to say standard. And that's really actually all we need to introduce this. So what's interesting is if I do Gradle W tasks, we can actually check to see. So remember, this is what the tasks were before, up here. This is what our tasks look like. Specifically, look at the install tasks. We have, well, no, that's the wrong one. Right here, our install tasks, when I ran it before, we have install debug, install release, install all. Well, down here, now look what we have. We have install pro debug, install standard debug, installed pro release, and so on. So you can see that the Gradle build system already now recognizes our two product flavors, and it responded by introducing entirely new tasks into the build system. That's actually a really cool feature of Gradle in particular. This is a slight tangent, but compared to other build systems that can't do this, Gradle is really cool about being able to create dynamically new tasks that can be ran based on the Gradle script itself. However, there's a slight problem with the way I've organized these flavors. Problem is that they will both share the same application ID. They'll both share the same package name. Now that's a problem, because remember, with Android, your applications are uniquely identified by your package ID. If you have two flavors with the same package ID, they'll overwrite one another. That might actually be very well what you want to have happen. You might want to be able to have a person, download and replace it with the Pro version if they only have the standard. But in our case, I want to be able to install both of these simultaneously on the same device and treat them as if they were two completely separate applications. So the way I accomplish this is under Pro, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say application ID space, open quote, com buzz app1 or test1, whatever I named. I can't remember what I named it. Let's just go with app1 dot pro. And then on standard, I'm going to say application ID, not with a colon, com buzz app1 standard. Okay, so let's go see how this, when we actually install these flavors, how it affects our device. So I'm over here on my command window, or command line prompt, I'm going to say Gradle W install, is it debug pro or pro debug? I always get them mixed up. Install pro debug. Installed pro debug. Now if we look at this, watch this really closely, we have main activity, and then suddenly now we have two. Now let's go ahead and say Gradle W install. I already forgot if it was install standard debug. It's compiling. Watch really closely. Watch our main activity thing here. And now we have 3. So yeah, so what's so interesting about having 3 applications now? Well, the reason we have that first one is because we created that application with a particular package name, and then when we created our flavors, we created new package names. For all intents and purposes, they were new applications put on the device. So now we have 3. We have the one before we added flavors, we have a pro version, and we have a standard version. But I don't really like how they're all named main activity. I never really liked that name of the application in the first place, and I especially don't like it now that we have 3 of them and there's no way to differentiate between them. So how do we fix that? Well, the answer goes back to resources. If we come here into our folder and we go to source main Android manifest, we see that the name of the application label, is set to string resource app name. So it'd be really cool if we could override this string resource on a per flavor basis. And in reality, that's actually very, very easy to do. This is really what flavors are all about. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's jump into our source folder. And in here, I'm going to create a new folder by hitting Control-Shift-N, and I'm going to call it Pro. Under Pro, I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call it Res. Under Res, I'm going to create a new folder and call it Values. Under Values, I'm going to create a new text document and call this strings.xml. And over here, I'm going to say resources. And then I'm going to say string name equals app name. I'm going to call this app1 Pro. Okay, so all I did was inside my source folder, I created my flavor folder, Pro. And inside of this, I created a corresponding resource folder. See how main has this resource folder? Well, I created a corresponding resource folder here, but I don't have to redefine all of my resources. And the reason for that is it'll take these resources that I define here in this flavor folder, and it'll merge it back against main. It'll see that I have this resource right here that's overriding the app name, and it'll override that for the entire build. So now when I come back to my command prompt, I can say Gradle W install pro debug. And if you watch my app launcher really closely, you'll notice that once it installs, it picked up on that new resource. Because now I have app1 Pro up here, but now I only have 2 main activities, meaning I successfully renamed one of my main activities. Let's go ahead and do the same thing for standard. I'm going to come back into Windows Explorer. I'm going to, remember, the source folder is immediately underneath the project. And I'm going to create a new folder called standard. Then I'm going to create a new folder called res for resources. Then I'm going to create a new folder called values. Then I'm going to create a text file, and I'm going to call it strings.xml. Then I'm going to bring this over here. I'm going to say resources, string name, app name, and I'm going to call this app1 standard, close string, close resources. Come back into our command prompt and type in Gradle W install standard debug. And now we have app1-standard, and we have the final main activity. The final main activity I'm going to go ahead and uninstall by hold clicking on it and dragging up to uninstall and confirming. So now we have app1 Pro and app1 standard. Okay, the last thing I want to show you guys is how to add Java code to our flavors. See, right now we're just overriding some resources, which is pretty cool, but isn't as cool as it could be, because I imagine strings are going to be more than what's changed between your Pro version and your standard version of your app. You'll also want completely different functionality. And more importantly, you might not want some specific functionality compiled into your standard edition. You might only want it compiled into your Pro, regardless of if it's accessible through the UI or not. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to do this in, there's basically 3 steps to do this. So the first step is I need to do something inside of my main that takes advantage of a class that could be overridden by either Pro or Standard. So inside of main, I'm going to open up main, Java, com, buzz, test1, and then I'm going to open up main activity. And I'm going to try to keep this as simple as possible here. So what I'm going to do is, on launch other activity, I'm going to say, I'm just going to go ahead and say app type dot launch other activity this. Then I'm going to take this intent and start activity and I'm going to cut it. So I'm saying app type dot launch other activity dot this. What is app type? Well, that's a class that hasn't been created yet. Not only that, that's a class that's not even going to exist in main. It's a class that's only going to exist in one of the two flavors, either pro or standard, and I'm going to create that class and and they'll both have this method on it, launch other activity, that'll accept an activity class. So then I'll have different behavior depending on the app type. So now let's back off all the way back into our source folder. Let's do pro first. Inside of pro, I'm going to write a Java folder. You know, this might be a whole lot easier if I go into options and I select blah, blah, blah. Where did they put that? You know that, there we go. Automatically expand to current folder. There we go. So it's a little bit more like an IDE here. So you can see the left-hand side, you can see the entire folder structure. Probably should have enabled that earlier. Oh, now Explorer's frozen. Oh, there it goes. Okay, so I'm going to create a new folder under Java called com. Under com, I'm going to create a buzz folder. In our buzz, I'm going to create a test1 folder. That's the namespace. Sorry, it's test1. Inside of test1, I'm going to right-click, select new, text document, and I'm going to say apptype.java. Then, inside of apptype.java, I'm going to say package com buzz app1, and then I'm going to say public class app type. It's not going to inherit from anything. And then public class app type will have a public static void, what do I call that? Launch other activity. And it'll take activity. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to basically say intent equals new intent activity other activity dot class, and then I'm going to say activity dot start activity intent. Okay, so this won't compile quite yet because I have a lot of importing to do. So I'm going to say import android dot content dot intent import android dot, and I can't always forget app dot activity, and then that should be it, because app type is going to live in the same package as other activities, so it doesn't need to import it. And that's going to be the pro version of my apptype.java class, or my apptype.java file. So let's see if it works. I'm going to come in here, and I'm going to say Gradle W launch pro debug. Launch pro debug not found in root project app1. Oh, install pro debug. Derp. And we get a error because I cannot find symbol app type. Variable type location blah blah blah. Cannot find symbol. I may have to import this for some reason. Oh, because the package is test1, not app1. Ah! My bad. And do we get a successful build? We do get a successful build. Okay, let's come back over to GetInMotion, and I'm going to launch App1 Pro, and I'm going to hit Press Me, and the same thing that happened before happened because of this intent here. I started the activity just like what we did before. So nothing has changed yet, but let's see what has changed. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say install standard debug. Now, what do you think is going to happen when I hit enter here? Now, think about it for a second. What do you think is going to happen when I try to compile the standard debug build type? I get an error. I get an error because it can't find the app type class. Why? because the app type class is local to the Pro flavor. Okay, so to speed this up, what I'm going to do here is on the Pro folder, I'm going to hit Control-C on Java, and I'm going to jump over into Standard, and I'm going to Control-V here. Then I'm going to open up Java, com, buzz, test1, and I'm going to drag over this standard version of this. And what I'm going to do here is, I don't know, let's go ahead and do something silly like launch the camera application. So I'm going to remove these arguments out of the intent constructor. And what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to pass in a string called android.media, or sorry, underscore media, dot action dot image underscore capture. Now over here, I'm going to go ahead and install standard debug. And you'll see now it'll compile. And since it compiled, let's go ahead and launch it. And when I open up App1 Standard and I hit the button, it launches the camera intent. And we see the Genymotion default camera there. If I hit back and go to my Pro version and hit the button, we see it just brings up the other intent that we had before specified by our other app type. Anyway, so just to recap, basically all we did was we went ahead and we created what are called flavors. All we did to do that was we created this product flavors configuration down here and specified Pro and Standard. After doing that, we saw how we can override our different resource values as well as add code into our project depending on the flavor. You'll also notice a really cool thing about flavors, which I know you guys have already seen, but I just like to really mention it this time. Flavors are different than build configurations, because you notice we have like install pro debug, but we also have install pro release. So that's really cool because we could do a pro in debug or a standard in debug, and then a release in debug in pro and a release in standard, which allows us in our application to do a release build using our dummy data or a debug build using our live data, which is really cool because typically this solution, the solution that most programmers come to, is they'll have the live version run when you're in release mode and the fake version run when you're in debug mode. But what if you wanted to debug the live mode? You can with this, because build configurations are different from flavors, and they get combined. The last thing I want to point out, and something we'll see near the end of this series, is multi-dimensional product flavors. So let's say I have a pro and a standard, but then let's say I have a light and a fully featured, or a paid and a not paid, or something like that. The point is, what if I wanted to mix them up and have a pro live debug, or a pro standard debug, or a pro release, something like that, where you can mix and match different flavors and have them stack one on top of each other? Well, you can do that too. But we'll see an example of that in a later video. I just wanted this to be a quick overview of something that's going to be coming up very shortly. Because it'll be coming up so quickly in the series, I wanted to show you guys it using just Sublime, Gradle, and our command line, just to really drive home the fact that there's no magic here. My favorite thing to do is to show people that there's really no magic and everything under the hood isn't that terrifying. So I hope everybody enjoyed this brief little couple of video long mini series on the internals of the Android build system and its project structure, and we'll see you guys in the next video.